Hi, this is Lifelong English Major, and I'm Susan Rushton, as you know, and I do Lifelong English Major because that's what I am, and I've told you this for several weeks, several months, why I do this, but I'll stop saying it soon. But I used to do books maybe once a year on my show, and finally I thought, well, geez, I'm a lifelong English major. Why don't I talk about books and book people and other things like that, writers, every month? So that's what I'm doing, and always on this show, Lifelong English Major, I share a book with you. This is The Little Prince that I've had for decades, and I have not more than a minute to talk to share with you. "Good morning," said the little prince. "Good morning," said the merchant. This was a merchant who sold pills that had been invented to quench thirst. You need only swallow one pill a week and you would feel no need of anything to drink. "Why are you selling those?" asked the little prince. "Because they are a tremendous amount of time. They save a tremendous amount of time," said the merchant. Computations have been made by experts. With these pills you save 53 minutes in every week." "And what do I do with those 53 minutes?" "Anything you like." "As for me," said the little prince, "if I had 53 minutes to spend as I liked, I should walk at my leisure toward a spring of fresh water." I like that. And I like this very much. That's why I still have it. My guest today is Sands Hall. Sands, thank you for joining me.
I'm just so delighted to be here. Thank you.
That's wonderful. I'm really happy. And if you are interested in may I share your email?
Sure.
Okay. sandsmhall@gmail.com. And so why are you here? Why do I have you? You are a writer. Absolutely, you are a writer, and you've been a writer for 18 years. How long? When did you start? When did you start writing?
You know, it's an interesting thing now that we spend so much time with laptops, but those early ages of picking up a pencil, picking up a pen, I really in a way can't remember when that wasn't interesting to me. And it started probably with songwriting. My father, bless his heart, had a great stereo system, and he played a lot of the Pete Seeger, bless his heart, Peter Yarrow, who just died this morning, Peter, Paul and Mary, of course Joan Baez, and just those, and Lead Belly. He had everything coming through, including the Who, and But I just think those early words and ideas, and the idea that someone could put a song together, that was a very interesting thing to me.
Yes.
And so just the idea of being able to take your thoughts and try to put something down on paper, and eventually just the magic of what it is when you're composing a sentence and you're trying to get a point across, or a word comes flying in that you didn't even imagine you were going to use, and just that whole process has always been so fascinating for me.
Yes, getting it. What do I want to say?
That's big.
And I can see it. And so can other people.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a real thrill. It's a real thrill.
And do you still do that with a pencil or a pen?
You know, I always carry my journal with me. Sometimes months go by when I don't.
How wise to have a journal.
But just because when I was attending the Iowa Writers Workshop, this is jumping many, many years forward, but I was complaining to my brother-in-law, Louis B. Jones, who's also a wonderful writer, and I didn't seem to be working on my writing, and he said, "You know, Sands, I know you've written in a journal all of your life. Are you writing in your journal every morning?" And I said, "I am." And he said, "Well, it occurs to me that all of your energy is going to your journal writing and not to your writing.
Okay.
That was a big revelation to me. So
Okay.
I learned to, where do I put that first, especially that morning energy when you're on something, you've got those ideas going. So is that to go to the wonderful idea of your morning pages, and trying to work out something that's going on with you in your psyche or your life? Or do you take that and apply it to the piece of fiction you're working on, the essay you're working on, the song you're working on, the memoir you're working on? Do you take and then use the journal in some other
play.
way? Or the play you're working on.
Yeah.
So that began to shift from how much, I think by the time I reached my 40th year, I had more journals than I was years old. I just
Wow.
poured my thoughts into it. So that was a big shift. That I think it's a very useful comment that my brother-in-law gave me.
At the same time, are you still writing a journal in a journal?
Periodically.
Periodically.
And then this has been an interesting thing. I have started to do this thing with my writing where I keep a journal for my writing. And it started with, I run this thing called the Accountability Gathering, where I get 8 people together, so there's 9 of us on a Zoom screen, so it's a nice little thing. And we basically meet once a week, and we start out by saying the project that we're working on, and then we meet and say what we're going to accomplish that day. We write for an hour or so, and then what did we accomplish, and what are we going to accomplish in the coming week. And I started to simply do that for myself, so that every time I would sit down, I would say, here's what I'm going to try to accomplish in my writing time today. And sometimes, as we all know, writing time can be
10 minutes?
a nice 3 hours, but often I've got, 15 minutes, or I want to make sure I'm working on forward progress on a project. So it's like, okay, well, I've got 35 minutes, and I'm going to set my alarm, and I've got 35 minutes.
Going to
so
do
I
it.
say, here's what I'm going to try to do in those 35 minutes.
Yes.
And some of that came from Annie Lamott's wonderful book called Bird by Bird.
Yes. Okay.
Her writing craft book. And amongst the things I really helped me so much is she said, keep a little postage stamp sized frame on your desk, empty. And your job is each day to fill that postage stamp. And if you can truly give yourself permission to only fill that and then go around about the rest of your day, and that helped me so much, because often, okay, my postage stamp is, I'm going to get his hand on the doorknob and it's going to turn. Right?
Yeah.
And as often as not, or I'm going to describe what she sees when she goes out to the beach at the sunset, or whatever.
Okay.
You start with that. But as often
You
as
can't
not,
stop.
You can't stop.
Yeah.
And that was
Yeah.
what was great. Yeah, so those are things are all kind of entangled for me. So I keep a journal about my writing, which means it's not going into my little black book I carry around with me. That's on my laptop, so I can easily move from that little piece of self, the goal I've set myself to writing, and then go back there and say, well, I accomplished that, or that went in a really weird direction, or,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that little talking to myself about my writing, I've found to be very useful.
Yes. This isn't part of my questions, but you said that certainly went off in a crazy.
Oh my goodness.
Do you start and with characters and just here are the characters and this is what they're doing, and well, I remember doing this.
Yes.
What? How can they? And I was thinking, how can they talk that way to each other? They can't do that. That's what are you doing? And there's that. These characters are deciding to do what they're deciding to do, regardless of what I want them to do. Or some people write. I can't think of the name of it, but they decide this is what's going to happen here.
Right.
This is, which do you do?
So there was a great discussion.
Both, Susan.
There was a great discussion that was going around the internet about a year ago, which was, are you a plotter or are you a, what's the other
Pantser.
word? Thank you.
What is it?
Pantser, as in by the seat of your pants.
Oh, okay.
And thank you very much, Philip. And
Yes,
And it
there are
was-
3 writers in this
Yes,
room.
exactly. And it was a great conversation because what it ultimately came around, and there was a lot of, obviously it just sounds so much better if you're a plotter. You plot things out and you're organized and you're disciplined and you know where you're going. And a pants are just, what's it sum up,
Yeah.
by the seat of your pants. But I think what a number of us came to is everybody comes to the same place ultimately. Like a plotter may do it all in their head but they're still plotting it out, where a pantser might do it, to use those terms, as they're going through it. And maybe they throw stuff out, or their characters go where they don't expect, and that takes the plot in a place they don't expect, which, I think it was Ethan Kanan who said, if you already know the ending, why write it? Now we're talking fiction in this regard.
Yes.
But if you're working on, say, a memoir, where you're trying to summon up, okay, here's this scene I really remember. Obviously, you don't remember every line of dialogue, but maybe you remember the important line of dialogue.
This is what happened.
This is what happened.
Yes.
This is where we were. This is maybe what the waitress brought at the very moment that he said this thing to me. She
Yes.
set down the cup. I can remember maybe those things. So out of that, I might build a scene. Now that's going to be different than following your characters where they might take you. However, what's really fun about memoir, and I think any memoirist would agree, anybody who's writing that way, is often you remember something that you didn't remember when you started writing. So something comes up because you're revisiting, you're retouching that cup of coffee that the waiter brought, just as the person.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness! And then I forgot that what happened then was because you've the beautiful word remember is putting things back together, right? You're remembering. So that is a really fun thing that also can happen and surprise the heck out of you.
Yes.
Yes. So I think that whole process of just being open to what's going on the page is very exciting one.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Next thing, you are in addition to writing, you are writing books.
And essays.
Writing books and essays. You also work on stage production. You write plays, yes, and I've seen one. I've seen one that you wrote, and I saw one that you directed recently with Phil.
Jacques. Philip Jacques playing 30 characters.
Yes. What got you into writing directing?
Well, the whole
acting?
issue of stage itself, and I just want to put a little pin in, I think you might have seen the play I wrote, would have been Fair Use,
I think so.
about the Wallace Stegner
Yes,
scandal.
yes.
Really, I'd like to put a pin in that and maybe come back to that.
Okay.
So when I was studying, this is just one anecdote, but when I was studying acting at the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, it's the advanced training program, many, many years ago when I was a wee thing. Theater, acting workshops are not unlike writing workshops in that you do a scene, you prepare a scene with usually another actor, and you take that in and you perform it in front of your classmates and a teacher, and the classmates talk about it and the teacher tells you what did. So I was working
What
on
you
a
did
scene
right and what you did wrong.
with a
Okay.
scene partner, and it had complicated stuff that was going on in the scene, and my scene partner and I sat in 2 chairs and we talked and we emoted and we talked.
Like
And-
this, like this,
yes.
which is not how people talk. And
And more importantly,
I don't know. Well,
it's not
gee.
even that.
Huh.
The teacher, the wonderful Ed Hastings, said, now there was a lot of very fine acting going on. But he said, and this changed my life, he said, if I turned the sound down on the scene, would I know what the scene was about? If I turned the sound down on the scene, would I know what the scene is about? Puts you into action right away.
Action.
What are people doing?
Yes. Yeah.
What is their behavior? It could be the cigar that Philip used to become Potter,
Yes, yes.
right? It can be the fact that someone's hand is shaking as they pour coffee for somebody else. It can be when someone chooses to cross a room. All of those things do we notice all the time when we are in
Yeah,
conversation with
yes.
others. So not only did that really shift the way I worked from then on as an actor, which is, well, basically, what props do I have around me
Uh-huh.
that can right away tell something to my observer, to the
Yes,
audience?
yes.
But it totally affected my writing because
People are
and
doing
I
something.
teach a lot of courses, and they come down again and again to these same principles, which have to do with how do you put a character into action, whether it's yourself in your memoir or a character you're creating on the page from a fictional character. How do we get them to be in action so the reader gets to know something about them? So that, of course,
Oh, that's helpful.
is such a helpful idea.
Yeah.
Because if you turn the sound down, can you still know what's happening between the people?
Yes.
I mean, you began to do it with your turning your body,
Yes.
but what if, we're in a kitchen and there's some, we have a wider angle than is
Yeah.
here, and you're getting my coffee and I'm looking at you,
Yeah.
and clearly I stop you and you stop on your way with a cup of coffee and proceed further
Mm-hmm.
going now, blah, blah. So you can see right away the audience go, well, we don't know what the topic is, but we know that something's happening between them,
Yes.
and then you can get further into those ideas. So that was just a big shift for me.
I'm imagining that you share this a lot
Yes.
with a lot of people.
Yes, this particular anecdote is one that's very close to my heart because it so changed the way I approached my writing, still approach my directing, certainly playwriting. Boy, are you down to basics there, right? You can't just have two people sitting in a chair, two
No.
chairs talking.
No.
The audience hasn't come there for that,
True.
They've come to see behavior. They want to see characters in action. I think one of the reasons art is so incredibly important is we're always looking for the reflection, the thing that holds, as Shakespeare said so well, that holds the mirror up to us. I am in that character. I am in that despair. I am in that joy. I am in that place of wondering what my life is about. That's why we go see movies. It's why we go stand in front of paintings. It's why we listen to music and get all emotional. I think all of that is
Yes.
is part and parcel.
Yeah.
Is holding the mirror up to nature, our nature, or the nature of humans in general.
Yes. Okay. What have you published? What did you publish first?
Well, the very first thing I published actually was my novel Catching Heaven, which is now kind of charmingly and disturbingly out of print. I went to order another, usually you could order another box of your books to have around, and they
Sorry,
weren't
lady.
anymore, yeah. So then I went on Amazon to see if I could buy up what were left, And it came out in both hardback and paperback, so that was really nice. And then, I often think that my publishing career is a little bit spotty, but I love my sister says to me, Sans, it's not like that's all you do. And it's important to remember that I have my theater career,
Yes.
I have my teaching career,
Yeah.
but anyway. And then I was away at Franklin and Marshall College teaching, a full-time professor for a decade. But what came next was I had spent 10 years of my life in the church/cult of Scientology.
Yes.
And for a decade after I managed to extricate myself from that, I tried to pretend that those 10 years hadn't happened. I was mortified by them. I was so embarrassed that I would have been caught up and stayed as long as I did, which was 7 years, and it was 3 years before I was sure that I wouldn't be pulled back. They were very, very good at that. So I was teaching at this college, Franklin and Marshall, being a professor, which was hilarious to me. If someone had told me that's what I would be doing, a decade previously, I would have laughed in their face. But there I was, loving, just a great job, great school, great students, great colleagues. And I'm teaching a course called Introduction to Myth and Fairy Tale. And
Darn.
I know.
I mean, it sounds wonderful.
Was wonderful. And part of it was, why did I come up with a course that covered both fairy tale and myth? Because somewhere about mid-semester there was the smell of burning rubber as I changed courses from the fairy tale to the myth. But they did have a similarity in that, many, but especially in that in a lot of fairy tales, the protagonist goes into some woods of some sort, and in the darkness there, something happens
Yes.
that changes them. And that was very similar, it seemed to me, a rather obvious connection, but it made really good sense to the idea of the hero's journey. That Campbell laid out this, he kind of extracted this thing that exists in most stories actually, is that a person is in a status quo, something's going on, and something shoves them out of that status quo. Either they're pulled, or they're shoved, or
They
they're
notice
asked.
something, or
They notice something, and that takes them on a journey. And often as not, that journey is a descent of some kind. They are asked to examine something about their life, about their personality, about their nature, about their choices, and that often will take us, we've all been there, into a place of darkness, of how did I get here? What did I do to bring this on myself? And in that darkness, Campbell has this wonderful phrase, as often as not, you die to yourself, you die to some part of yourself that needs to be let go of, or to shift, or to change. And about that time, you begin to re-emerge and climb back up to what is your status quo. But of course, everything's different because you have changed. So I wanted very much to get this idea across to my students. I felt that if there was one thing I could have them take away with them, it would be that when you're having a hard time, when you're going to have a million hard times in your life, if you can think of it as a journey, that in that darkness there's something you're learning, then maybe I could affect their lives in some very positive way. So I'm going along doing this and having a final time teaching, and this little voice starts to say to me, well, you could look at your time in Scientology like that. And absolutely not. That was stupid. You know, and then again, this little kind voice was coming and saying, well, you could look at your time in Scientology like that. And I'm going, that was just me being so stupid, and I just don't even want to think about it. But it was a very insistent little voice, Susan. And that was how I started my memoir, which is, it's called Reclaiming My Decade Lost in Scientology.
Recalling my decade. Reclaiming.
And a very important word, because in the writing of this book, those years that I thought were squandered and wasted and that I couldn't bear to think about, I could say, oh no, look at the things I learned. Look at what I came through. Look at what I now know. Positive, great things that I can carry with me.
I made it.
That's right.
Yes.
So I
learned a lot.
I learned a lot.
And that I didn't want to learn.
I didn't want to learn. Or how wonderful that I still have. For one small example is in a Scientology course room, and there's a lot of studying. I learned I love study, and I'm a scholar. I loved it. And the second thing is, L. Ron Hubbard has this thing about if you don't understand a word, you need to look it up, and which is duh, but a lot of us don't do it. But then in addition to looking it up, you look at where the word came from, the derivation. And boy, did my life pop open at that point. It was enormous. Speaking of a lifelong English major, when I found out that the suffix ology meant study of, and you could apply it to, psychology, study of the spirit or the soul. Driving past a sign that said dermatologist was like eye-opening. It was like, oh, it's the study of skin. It was all this. It was that was like pop, pop, pop. Everywhere I looked, I was very grateful. Now, a lot of students and kids get that, and they should. I was teaching in classes, after and I go into a fourth grade classroom, and there would be all these prefixes on one side of the blackboard and all these suffixes on the other, and I'm like those lucky fourth graders. Yes. Look at what they're already getting,
If they choose to look at it.
But I didn't, I think there was just this sense that you would know that by osmosis or something.
Yeah.
But something like that, it changed my whole relationship to language, to writing, to who, you know, sometimes I'll be in the middle of writing a sentence. I really don't know what that word actually means. And I'll go and look it up and look up the derivation, look up the synonyms. And it's a wonderful Pop-Tart of adventure
Yes.
in the world of words.
Yes.
So that was a great thing to actually reclaim that I had continued to do, but thank you very much. They don't do it so much anymore. You know, L. Ron Hubbard died in '87, and it's so funny because he was like, never change a thing about, and of course the new guy, David Miscavige, changes a lot. So it's very interesting, all that. But
And you're not involved with it anymore?
no.
Okay.
No, I mean, one of the sad things, amongst the things that makes a cult is it's us versus them, and when you leave, you're bad. And if you want to leave, you're bad because you shouldn't want to leave. So that is a very psychological piece of pummeling that you have to get through. I think every person who's been in a cult, whether it has to do with yoga, which I think there's some forms that alas, or, there's so many. That is one of the hardest, is if I leave, I no longer have my friends that I have had for years. So that was a big one.
Yes.
That was a big one.
Yes.
Because it was 7 years of dear friendships. We were all searching for our spiritual paths. We were engaged in our art forms. We shared so much with one another. And I really had to say goodbye to them. And that was hard. Now some of them have left, and now I'm friends with them again. So that's
Okay. Okay. So we've had you asked me to
put a pin in it.
put a pin
In it. Yeah.
in it.
So here's the thing about my Playfair use, and this is I wanted to talk about, because sometimes we use our writing for other things. So I came across a scandal, which I think was somewhat known in my town of Grass Valley, Nevada City, which is that Wallace Stegner, when he wrote his book Angle of Repose, which won a Pulitzer, used the journals and the letters of a woman who lived in Grass Valley, a woman named Mary Halleck Foote, to create his story. And so
And
he didn't give her any kind of credit. And what is interesting, so you said something in your notes about bringing a book to carry around. So I've been carrying these books around. I thought it would be fun for you. So this is
Oh my God!
But
And that
equally important, you see, is this, which is by her, which so all of these things are related to all of these things where scenes have been copied verbatim.
Shame on him.
Yeah. It's
Shame.
an amazing story. So I wrote an essay. It's in a wonderful journal called Alta Journal. Everybody should have a subscription to this magazine. They're so great. They are kind of a New Yorker of the West, but it's literary stuff, it's photographs, it's essays, it's stories, it's short pieces, it's long pieces, and they allowed me to do a beautiful long piece based on this entire outrage that I felt about this.
Okay, and I want you to hold him up like this. Okay. and yeah, that's appalling. That's just appalling.
It's it's chapter and verse, but if you're interested in this, you can go to the Alta magazine, Alta Journal website and look up my name, Sands Hall, or a quote from one of Stegner's letters, which I talk about in the essay, which is called The Ways of Fiction Are Devious Indeed. And that's the name of the article, of the essay. The Ways of Fiction Are Devious Indeed. Or just Google Sands Hall under Alta Journal. And I'm very pleased that they published it. They gave it a lot of words.
Good.
So they really, and they did beautiful drawings and illustrations to accompany it, both images of Wallace Stegner, sort of superimposed on images of Mary Halleck Foote and vice versa. They did a wonderful job of that. But so the story is about the play is that we were going to do, up in Nevada City, we were going to do an adaptation, a stage adaptation of this play, because it made great sense, because much of it takes place in Grass Valley. And then at the meeting, one of the people at the meeting who had lived in Grass Valley forever, was born there, said, I think there's this little controversy around a woman who lived locally that Stegner borrowed material from, and maybe, we should look into that. And I'm like, Stegner.
Stegner's a
is
big deal.
amazing. So I really
He wouldn't
reluctantly
do
don't
that.
do that.
How-
but the
why would
next
he do
day-
that? No, he doesn't need to do that.
Exactly. The next day, the woman who's directing the play drops by my house with this. And she said, I just saw it in the bookstore. She said it was actually shelved next to Angle of Repose. And so I started to read it, and I'm like, fine, I'll just be dutiful. But within minutes, I'm like sitting up going, I just read this in Angle of Repose. I just read this in Angle. I couldn't believe it. I had shivers up and down so that got me launched on what has become. So that's the play you saw.
Yes, it
called
is.
Fair Use.
And what year was that?
Well, it's had several productions. Did you see it at the Nevada Theater?
Yes.
So that would have been its very first premiere, and that would have been 01.
2001.
Yes,
Okay.
and then it's been done, I've done it twice at the North Star House where Mary Halleck Foote made her home, and where Wallace Stegner, having named it the Zodiac House, North Star, Zodiac, get it? His narrator is sitting there writing.
How frustrating.
Oh yes, so I've done it there several times as a fundraiser for the North Star House, and we'll probably do it again in 26. We'll do another performance of it there. So, if your readers are interested, keep an eye on the North Star House website because we'll be doing a staged reading of the play, which lends itself to staged reading really well up there. So,
How long did it take you to write that play?
I wrote it in a heat. I was so outraged, so outraged. So I think we probably had that meeting in, fall of 99.
Okay.
And my then sweetheart and I went down to Mexico, and I remember just sitting in the truck beside him, just scribbling away.
Yeah.
Had these 2 books with me, and a lot of other books too. Did a ton of research, and I created a situation where there was a woman named Playwright, and her father named Historian. And it's the dialectic, really, a dialogue between the two of them, because she wants to write this play about this scandal she's discovered, but Historian is an ex-student of Stegner's and wants to defend him. So I'm able to present the play, but there's always someone there who can defend what Stegner did. And I think that's very important, so the audience gets to be the judge and jury.
Yes.
And many people have come up to me and said, my wife and I are still arguing about it. Which makes me very happy.
Oh, yeah.
So
Wow.
I've been working on that, and that was a very recent project, as I say. And then I'm very pleased Alta Journal just asked me, turns out that they're going to do an issue on the 25 books that shaped California. And many librarians have presented Angle of Repose as one of the major California books, and of course I see why. So I get to address the reason of why that I'm excited. Why would that be on a best of list, and still, even though so much of it's just plagiarized, do we consider it a great book? So I'm excited about that too. Yeah,
Wow.
Lots going on there.
So you've written plays, you've written books, you've taught, you have published your stuff,
I'm a lifelong English major. What can I tell you?
Yes. What do you think makes a good writer or director or actor? Does the same thing make them good?
Well, it's such an interesting question, because on one hand I would say what that anecdote I told before about the turning down the sound and making things action, but we know that actors and directors and writers are so diverse, and the styles in which they work are so incredibly different, and you wouldn't want it to be some sort of cookie cutter thing.
That's true.
And what does one director bring, but I just saw that the most recent Dylan movie, I get it confused, No Direction Home. It's not that one, it's the other one. It's the other line from that. But that director, if you watch that frame by frame, always, it's like we have Dylan sitting up in bed with his guitar across his lap, scribbling, trying to come up with, lyrics. Joan Baez, it's like that, but it's always around the action. It's always so. But the style of what that is, as is different from, say, Barbie, as could possibly be, and yet in that little place, that character is defined through action, through objects and action, I think, and setting where we find people. Those things always they have a kind of pulse through all sorts of work. So I would say those are some similarities. I would say that between all of those. Different directors approach it different way, different actors approach it different ways, and different writers do, and often they're just, you're in awe of what they do.
Yes.
Just in awe. That's where I sit most of the time,
Yes.
in awe.
What's the hardest part about writing?
Oh, the business. By far. Oh my God, getting it out.
Afterwards.
Yes.
Afterwards.
Yes.
That's the hardest
part. The number of, I've got so many essays and stories, and it's just
you have to be by yourself for all the time, and then suddenly you're finished and you have to deal with people.
Well, and you also have to get it sold.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's why it's so nice when someone comes and says to you, "Would you please write something?"
Yes. What would you like me to write?
I'll do it. Yes. But that's to me the magic of it really is in the processing of what you are figuring out what you want to say and get it down on paper, or you as an actor or as a director or whatever. That is the great joy.
Okay. I have a question that isn't on my list. When you look in dictionaries, in the dictionary, do you use the dictionary in your machine, or do you use a dictionary?
Got me. For years I insisted I am never going to use that, but of course it's too easy when you're in the middle of typing to move over and pull up your, and then go, ooh, and then back. Whereas to go get my lovely OED that my dad gave me with its little magnifying,
me too.
It's just a whole different thing. So I will sometimes go there, especially for real roots of words that have gotten me really interested and stuff like that. But I'm and even there, you can find it like that on the internet.
Yes.
So I reluctantly admit that I reluctantly admit that I delightedly use the internet.
Okay. So we've talked about some advice periodically, in back and forth. If someone who comes to you and says, "I want to write or direct or act," what advice do you have for these people?
Well, those are really different things.
You're right, yes.
But I think the overall thing would be get yourself around people that are doing that. Whether it's a workshop as a writer or going to see readings of plays as a director or as an actor, getting to know people in that world locally, so that you can share that. When I quite weirdly moved to Grass Valley, weird set of circumstances, I knew nobody. I knew absolutely nobody. And how I built that community was just like, well, I need to know somebody who's in theater, which was, I got my MFA in theater and an MFA in writing, but I was very focused on the theater. So, a friend of mine said, I've got a friend, and I called up this friend. I'd been in town for 2 days, and I said, I understand that you are a person in the local theater, and could we have a cup of tea sometime? And she said, and we talked a bit, and she said, sure, when would you like to do that? And I said, how about now? And I went over to her house, and her husband was off at Burning Man as it happened. So we just went, brr, brr.
Yeah.
And this is one of my favorite stories. Her little boy, about 4 at the time, brings my purse over to me, and he puts it in my lap, and he says, you can leave now. Because we had just talked for probably 4 straight hours. So that began to build that community, And then also, I knew I wanted to teach. And so I just started something called Sierra Writers Workshop, which I didn't even check to see if it didn't already exist. It already existed. And I thought, and I called them up and said, I'm so sorry. And they said, no problem. You can use our name for the time being, but you have to come and speak to our group. So
Well,
that
yeah.
was pretty lovely.
That'll
so
do
I
it.
would say the bottom line is build that community as best you can.
Okay.
You know, find a workshop. Even online, there's so much as writers now we can do and build that community, but
Yeah.
certainly locally. I think
Okay.
that would be a great
Okay.
answer.
Wow. Wow. I got the right person here.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
just been such a, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I just love that you're a lifelong English major and that you share your stuff with us. And can I just say that coming up on March 8th is the Sierra Writers Conference. It's actually running something like the February 23rd through March 8th because it's all the Sierra campuses, Truckee, Rockland, and Nevada, Grass Valley area. So go on and find that. But on March 8th, I'm going to keynote the morning. I get to speak in the morning and at the Sierra Nevada campus of Nevada of Sierra College, and I'm going to keynote around ungodly hour like 8:30. Lots of workshops that day, and then in the afternoon, Amy Tan is going to be speaking about her new book, which is incredible. So I just want to put that out in people's feelers
Wonderful.
for the next,
Wonderful.
yeah, to
Thank
think
you.
about that.
Okay.
And you can find all that information at sierrawritersconference.org.
SierraWritersConference.org. Okay.
And you can get hold of me through my website, www.sandshall.com, or you can, very easy, is sands@sandshall.com is the best way to reach me.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you very much,
Thank
Sands
you.
Hall. Thank you very
so
much.
Susan. What an entire pleasure.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes,
And thank
yes,
you,
it was.
Phil.
I'm glad you were here. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again.